understand, Bill, that we do have a recognition this evening?
We do, and maybe I'll have Chris Knutson, Water Division Manager, come up and explain first what recognition we're gonna give, and then we'll have Kevin Young come up as well. Talk about it.
Christopher Knutson, Water Division Manager. So we will take this opportunity to formally introduce Kevin Young, who started with MPS as a Water Division engineer back in September. And Kevin is concurrently a graduate student at NDSU and working on some research that's directly beneficial to MPS and optimizing our treatment process. So Kevin's done a fantastic job on that research and has won an award from the Minnesota AWWA for fresh ideas. They have a part of the annual conference is an opportunity for students to present their research and their work. And Kevin presented at the Minnesota conference and the North Dakota conference and happened to win in Minnesota. So he received a complimentary trip to the annual conference for 2014.
And where is the annual conference?
I believe it's in Boston this upcoming year. So I'll let Kevin talk a little bit more about it.
Okay, so I'm Kevin, the new Water Division engineer. So basically my research and poster is it's ongoing. It's been going on for like 10 years probably, but it's dealing with the ozone disinfection process at the water plant, specifically bromate formation, and bromate is regulated by the EPA. And so we want to keep that bromate formation down to basically nothing. And in the ozone disinfection process, if you don't know, ozone basically attacks everything in the water. That's why we use it for taste and odor removal and organics removal from the water. And we produce it by sending high purity oxygen through ozone generators, and it's basically electrically charged and splits oxygen atoms, and they combine to form ozone. And then that ozone reacts with just background bromide that is in all of our wells and in the river. And if the conditions are right, you can form bromate. And we've never gone above the MCL. It's based on a yearly average. So we're good there, but since it is regulated, we want to just make sure that we don't go above that level, or we want to send out the best water possible. And so last year, the study really kicked off with Leslie Storley. She was a part-time water plant operator at the time, and her study found that we're forming this bromate. She developed a model based on her results and data from all the sampling she did, and then we came up with some recommendations or ways we could improve operation at the plant to reduce the formation. And then this summer we made those changes and found out that they're very successful. We formed bromate to a not really concernable level at all, just a couple isolated instances, but.
Well, just a question on, wasn't there, like, the contest was a poster? Is
Yep.
that what I hear? So,
Yeah,
I mean,
so
there's a, pardon me?
I made like a 4 foot by 3 foot poster.
Okay, which explained all of what you just described.
Yep,
Okay.
yep, a little more in depth.
I don't know. Where is this poster?
It's at the water plant.
So in order to see this poster, you've got to.
There you go.
Yeah,
I guess.
Is it permanently hanging at the water plant?
it is.
It is. We can
Mike,
put it in the
Mike.
next packet though, if you'd like to see it.
Might guess someone could take a photograph of it.
Well, that would be my thought.
Yeah,
At the very least, I would assume
we
if
have
there
technology.
was hanging,
Yeah.
there would be some recognition of it.
One would think so.
Yeah, it's one of the things. So would you take care of that, Rick?
Absolutely.
So can this process then be used by others as well, once you present it, or is this something
The same types of ideas could be used. Basically what we did, we're not going to use the Moorhead aquifer during the summer anymore. That's when bromate formation is at its most, and that has the most bromide in it out of all of our source waters. So we're going to stop using that in the summer, which we used to use a lot because it could reduce our chemical usage for softening. We're going to try to keep the ozone dose lower, closer to the required contact time by EPA. And then we're going to try to keep an ammonia level that we add to the water at a high enough level where it's kind of inhibits bromate formation.
Wonderful. Anybody else? Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Enjoy the lot.
Thank you. Never been there before.
In June, oh, that's good.
I was just looking, I Googled bromate because I wondered what the heck is bromate.
Yep.
Talk about that a little bit because this is important.
Yep.
It's kind of easy to talk about it, just kind of, off the cuff a little bit about it's not good, but it's really not good, is it?
No.
Why?
And don't give us a technical answer because we don't understand it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, in
Why don't we want this in the water?
the EPA came out with their stage 1 disinfection byproduct rule, and it was listed on there as a contaminant in the water that we shouldn't have in there. And being an ozone disinfection process is the reason why it's a concern for us. So that's kind of started the research, and then now it's getting to the point where we know how we can prevent it.
What is the
Without
concern to
keeping it in there.
humans?
You wanna-
It's actually a carcinogen or a suspected carcinogen.
Yep.
So it's a really important thing that you're doing.
It is really important, but for the studies that they've done, they've injected it into the bloodstream of rats, and now there's suggestions that when it's ingested, it breaks down in the stomach.
So this is
there's-
important work.
There's ongoing research with it.
Yeah. Cool.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gavin.
Is there anybody else that you want to bring up for recognition?
Under the GM report, we're going to have Sam Jenkins come up and talk about GIS items.
So there's no other festival or
No.
recognition for this day?
No.
Any old business, Bill?
No.
The next item on the agenda will be the public hearing that's supposed to take place in about an hour. So we'll skip right on down to the reports. Members of the city council. Councilman Hewlett's working on his microphone.
I don't see the little light.
We gotta make the
I've got a comeback for that and you see in the light, but thanks for the straight line.
We made the little light shine.
Yes, you did.
I have nothing really to report tonight. We will have a council meeting on Tuesday because of Veterans Day on Monday. And busy agenda as we work toward final budget for 2014.
And I understand that you'll be meeting with the budget committee this week. Is that true?
We have our continuing meeting tomorrow morning, 7:30 right here.
Thank you for that. And by the way, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank you and all the other candidates who ran for public office here in Moorhead for conducting yourselves in a very good way. And I think it reflected well on Moorhead. I thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay. Members of the Public Service Commission, anything to report?
Sure, since Mike brought it up, Monday is Veterans Day, and some people might even have the day off. There are lots of activities going on in the communities, including color guard activities at most of the cemeteries in West Fargo, Moorhead, Dilworth, Sabin, etc. There is a ceremony at the Veterans Memorial Bridge at 9 a.m. There is a ceremony at the Civic Center at 11. There's one at the Moorhead Armory at 11. And all the VFWs and American Legions have good deals on food all afternoon or until it runs out.
Okay. Well, and thank you for that reminder. David?
I have one thing. I mentioned in the pre-minutes before the meeting started, the 26th of November happens to be our next scheduled meeting, but it's also the night of the Holiday Lights Parade that is a cooperative effort between the two communities. And so I bring that up so that we can identify whatever our alternate is going to need to be, because I don't believe we really want to meet on top of that event.
Casey, is that something you can look into even as we speak, so that we can reschedule that appropriately? While Casey's doing that, Bill, do you want to start your general manager's report?
Yeah, and the first,
Anybody else, excuse me, anybody else on the commission have anything to say? Okay, Bill, go ahead.
first item, oh, go ahead.
Does 19 work for everybody? Can I send out an email and check this out guys at 19?
Please do,
We're a week earlier right now.
please do. Okay, William?
Well, the first item on the general manager's report, talking about the GIS day, and Sam Jenkins, I'm going to ask him to come up to the podium and talk about this a bit. We did bring it up at the Moorhead Business Association meeting, and seems like there's a lot of people that are interested in GIS, so I thought this would be a good time to talk a little bit about our activities. So, Sam, take it away.
Thank you. Sam Jenkins, GIS Coordinator. GIS Day is a global forum for users of GIS to demonstrate how it benefits society. And as a user of GIS, MPS is hosting an event. We will have published a web map at gis.mpsutility.com, and on that web map are geographic clues and geographic information tools that will allow the community to discover the location of our GIS Day event. Once they use that map and those tools to discover that location, they can come down on GIS Day, which is the 20th of November, between 3:30 and 6:30. And at the event, we will have demonstrations and printed maps and web maps and demonstrations of our technology that show how MPS uses GIS to be a better utility.
Okay, any questions?
So I actually have to go online to find out where I'm going to go.
You do. The URL is gis.mpsutility.com.
You're not going to share this right now?
Nope.
are you?
Not even to your employers in the commission?
No. It's a challenge. But
Thanks, Sam, I needed that.
but it's a doable challenge.
Okay,
There's some hints on the web map and some instructions and some hints on the web map.
Okay.
And I think it'll be a fun game for the community to understand a little more about GIS and then to see how Moorhead Public Service uses GIS as well.
thank you.
Now, they can also go to our website, right?
There is also a link on the mpsutility.com website. That's right.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. The other thing I was going to
Just so
mention.
you know, Commissioner Norman, it doesn't say a whole lot on that website yet.
So you're telling me I'm going to be lost until the appropriate time?
We're all lost right now.
Thanks for that, Sam.
I think Commissioner Bucky is referring to the format of the web map that we have produced. And I should have said that it is based on an Adobe Flex site, so you'll need a browser that can run a Flash application.
And for even those of us who are technologically challenged, we'll be able to find our way, will we?
If you're sitting on a desktop with a Flash-enabled browser, you can definitely do that.
My gut feeling is Commissioner Norman will not be at the event.
He might be driving around Moorhead.
Sam, will you come pick me up?
Ken, if you call me about 3:25, I might just have.
Why is everybody picking on me?
So if I use my Android, I could get to it.
Yes, Android has a
But I can't with
Flash-enabled
Apple.
browser. Yep,
I had to say that.
that's right.
You would have to say that, wouldn't you? You just made Commissioner Baki's day. William?
Just a few other things on the GM report if you're done with that item. Any more questions for Sam?
I don't think so.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Sam.
Thanks, Sam. And I'm just going to make my way down the list. If you look at number 3, we had a Oakport Joint Powers Board meeting with some pretty good success for Moorhead Public Service. The Oakport Joint Powers Board approved the petition that the commission had presented to the Joint Powers Board. In essence, that basically told Oakport that the recommendation or the Oakport Joint Powers Board supports Moorhead Public Service in on that January 1st, 2015 receiving of that land and tower and the water system to our system. So if there's other questions on that, we can talk about that later. we will be meeting with Oakport tomorrow, John Bolger and myself, so we'll keep you in tune on what's going on up there. So we're still trying to get some resolution on the water tower issues up there, so. And that meeting will be at 10:30 here at City Hall. So if any commissioners would like to join John and I.
You know, that brings to mind a question, and Bill, I think it might be something you want to start considering in earnest, and that is the annexation of Oakport Township in 2015. And we should probably start moving toward whatever steps we have to take to be prepared for that eventuality. And we may even want to put together a subcommittee of this body to study any issues that are going to be forthcoming.
So I think one of the issues we have, and we discussed that in the budget meetings as well, is that one of the things we need to do is we need to find out from the current providers what the infrastructure is. And they have not been sharing that information with us.
They are notorious for not sharing that type of information with us. Is that something, I see Joe's back there, maybe we should see if Joe would come down, if somebody'd wake him. Mr. Moore?
Joe Moore, Manager of Operations.
With regard to the Oakport Township and coming in, have we made any inquiries as to the status of that equipment that's currently out there?
We have been investigating what is up there. XL, of course, is a different voltage than what we use, so that'll be a case that we'll have to work through. Red River is the same voltage, so hopefully we can just tie into their system and take it over from there.
Okay. Bill, have you taken any steps to contact them on those issues?
We have, with not a lot of success, both myself and our staff and Kayla Brennan, our attorney, have made contacts to both Red River and XL. And I believe it will be early 2014 before we'll have any success in getting information from those systems. Now, our staff has been doing some work with our GIS, system that can gather data, and we've been sending interns up there to get some data, but it would be nice to get the maps. And I'm guessing we will get them, but not until 2014.
So essentially all you're doing is visual inspection at this stage?
At this stage, yes.
Okay.
So if we get the maps and the information in early 2014, will we be able to actually do the transition in 2015?
It would probably be the middle of 2015 would be the earliest, and we would have to adjust some things in the budget. I believe in our budget we are not planning, well, I know in our budget we're not planning on doing any kind of infrastructure installation in 14 in anticipation of 15. We would actually do it in 15. And that's because we anticipate possible legal action with one of the utilities, at least one of the utilities up there, and that will be at the minimum, at the minimum it'll be summer of 15 that we would actually be able to tie into the system.
The anticipated legal activity that may result as part of that annexation is why I think that maybe we should put together a subcommittee of this body, so that we can look at what alternatives we can examine to minimize the impact of that potential. So if anybody's willing to volunteer for that committee, let me know, but I do think that we should see how we can accomplish what we have to accomplish without having to go through the steps that we've gone through in the past. I have made a preliminary contact with Mr. Crostu, who is the chairman of the board for Red River Valley Co-op, and I told him we'd like to sit down and talk. And so I think to that extent, we should start getting into that process, because there's got to be ways that we can make this work.
And that legal action is only with respect to the buyout, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. And from an equipment standpoint, if we need to do changes, and I know I've seen some numbers on what it may cost us to actually do that, and they're in the $4.5 million range. So it's not going to be a cheap process, right?
Right. Correct.
Yeah. Are you talking about the buyout, or are you talking about installation?
Installation. Buyout, we don't know.
Equipment-wise, we're looking potentially 4.5 million?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Do we know
And
what-
those numbers are up from what we initially thought.
They're certainly up from what they thought
Yep.
when we
Yep.
signed the annexation agreement.
Do we know what ward that Oakport is going to end up being in? Is that
I'm
gonna be
assuming
first?
that'll be the first ward, wouldn't it, Mike? Yeah. And I think that those boundaries have already been drawn in terms of that particular ward.
That's correct. When the recent redistricting took place, that was taken into consideration.
Okay.
I would only suggest that it might be a good idea for that ward to be represented along with somebody else in having those discussions. You know, it's going to be their
Are you
territory.
talking about our council representatives?
And whoever's representing First Ward here.
I want to thank you for that recommendation, Mr. Anderson.
I was being subtle, but
No, you weren't.
to me it would make sense.
I think the chair ought to be on that group as well because of the implications that are there.
And quite frankly, since we're passing around the tar and the feathers, I'm thinking that perhaps our council liaison, whoever that might be, going into 2014, should also be a part of that because of the huge implications from a budgeting standpoint otherwise. So, Mike, if you continue on as our liaison after the new mayor takes office, I would ask that you consider that. Go ahead, Bill. What
Thank
next?
you. Number 4, we had session number 3 of the, I'm not even sure what our group is called, but the discussion about transfer between the city and the commission, city council and the commission. And session number 4 is tomorrow morning, and this is just partly because I wanted to make sure and remind our committee that we will be meeting tomorrow morning at 7:30, and we'll be meeting right in that room over there, so.
Do you normally do a wake-up call for Ralph?
Oh, no, he's prompt, he's right there.
I may not look handsome, but I am here.
But we have had good meetings. I mean, I think it's been very informational, and I don't know if any of the commissioners want to add anything to that, but, or give a report, but I think we're continuing the discussion. And now after the election and after our rate hearing tonight, we'll continue on with that, so.
I would only add that I think it's been a really good educational opportunity for everybody in the room. We've all made some points, you know, and not scoring points, but we've all made, I think, what are really good points of understanding about what it is that has been of concern to us as commissioners, as opposed to just the historic kind of, well, we've always done it that way. You know, we've really gotten into what are kind of the hard realities of the needs that we have, you know, in capital work over the next, you know, umpteen years, along with more understanding of what it is that the city is working with and faced with their budget. So you know, in that way, I think it's been really good. I think the challenge now, as we start to wrap this up, is going to be to kind of get it out to all of the other, the rest of you and all of the other members of the city council. You know, that's going to be a communications effort that all of us are going to have to take on together.
And in light of those budget discussions, Mike, is there anything further that you can enlighten us with regard to the potential for the street lighting utility? Do we know where that whole discussion is going?
I do not know where that discussion is going. We will be discussing budgets here very soon, and that'll be part of that discussion.
Okay, please keep us advised of that as well. It's a quite important topic.
Sure.
Anything further, Bill?
Yeah, just the next couple items. One is on Missouri River Energy Services, and I just provide a little bit of an update. And then the following one is on the Western Area Power Administration update. Those are our two power suppliers, basically 50%, 50%. And there's a lot of things that are happening on both of those. And I know some of the commissioners have been to, you know, meetings with Missouri River Energy Services. And they've also, at those meetings, talked about like our Western Area Power contract, those types of things. So a little bit of an update for Missouri River. I've just got 3 bullets there. First one is Red Rock Hydroelectric Project. Eventually, in a couple of years, that will be about 5% of our power supply will be from a hydroelectric plant in Iowa, Pella, Iowa, where they make Pella windows. And That one is all renewable, so that's a good thing, because more utilities are doing more renewables. And with those renewable energy sources, they are more expensive. They're more expensive than coal, so it does put a little upward pressure on our rates. And but it is increasing our portfolio of renewable resources, and that helps with CO2 emissions, which is of concern to many. So that's ongoing, and you'll hear updates from time to time on those. Next bullet was our reserve capacity agreement was approved. That was a big deal because when we first did this a few years ago, remember the term was only like 5 years, and now it's been extended from 2018 to 2029. And that means that our lease payments for our generator that's over by Moorhead Youth Hockey Arena will continue to get payments through 2029. So that was a big deal. The third one, and we're still working on this one, we're working with Missouri River staff and WAPA staff to provide basically transmission service that's newly required by NERC that will help us so that we don't have to spend a lot of money doing those NERC activities. And we've had to wrestle with WAPA a bit on providing those services, but it is a high valued item. Marshall, Minnesota has to pay Xcel Energy about $130,000 a year for Xcel to provide these services to Marshall. And our options were not, we didn't have Xcel as one of our options because Marshall has, just like we have WAPA and MRES, they actually have Xcel, MRES, and WAPA right at their gate of their city. And someone had to provide that service, otherwise the utility in Marshall would have to do that. And they were looking at adding staff. We would have to look at the same thing, add staff, add dispatchers to perform some of those duties. So if we can get WAPA to perform that, it could be, you know, $100,000 to $200,000 worth of savings to us every year. So we're working on that, and that's an important item. On the Western Area Power Administration update, really just that first bullet, you can glance through the other ones, but the first bullet is our contract that's up in 2020 that we will extend to 2046. I know those are long-term contracts, but that's a good thing. Ours is one of the more complicated contracts, so they're waiting to the end to do those. You can see there they've got 144 contracts total, and they're done with about 123. Ours is one of those remaining, 21 that are left, and we expect to, receive some confirmation that they're want to meet with us in the near term, probably in early 2014. Other than that, those are kind of updates for MRES and WAPA. And
we're not worried about the WAPA contract not being renewed, right?
no, it's a good question though. I mean, they actually moved this process up a little bit in order to get all these contracts done and signed and sealed and delivered, because at the federal level there's always talk about not renewing these contracts or changing them significantly, and as of right now there hasn't been any significant attention to changing the contract. There has been significant attention from the DOE, huge interest in WAPA and Bonneville, and that continues with you remember the whole Stephen Chu, Department of Energy Secretary Stephen Chu, a lot of interest in getting WAPA and now Bonneville to do a lot more transmission for renewables, and we were concerned about the subsidies to that. Now we have a new Secretary of Energy, and it seems like the shift has gone from WAPA to Bonneville at the present time, but could come back to WAPA. So it will be very comforting when we do get this contract finalized.
Do we know about the ones that have sent out already? Were there significant changes in those, or were they pretty much the same that they had before and we just extended?
They're I would call it significantly similar to what they were before. However, there's, especially with NERC, there's a lot of new things, and they've actually separated these contracts out. Like our contract, that was one contract, I believe is going to be 5 separate contracts now. dealing with the interconnections with us and metering and reliability. So that's just, it's just getting a little bit more complex and specific in how they're dealing with those contracts. Good questions.
Anything further?
No.
I see in item 8, you've got several different configurations with regard to the conference room at dispatch. And I think that you should explain to the members of the commission at least that we will be holding meetings out there, safety meetings and so forth for our employees. If there's some concern as to why we're getting furniture out at the dispatch center, why don't you explain what's going on out there, Bill?
Yeah, we basically have a couple of configurations. We actually don't have all of them in there. If you kind of take a look at what we would use that conference room for, that area, and I'm going to have Joe Moore come up here too, because Joe's been the one that's been working on this and done a great job. Because what we've done is we've done some major reconstruction at our old 1950 water plant. It's a very fortified building, and so this conference room is really at the center of that building. Think of it as surrounded by concrete. And so one of the things that's going to be used for very minimally is an emergency operations center for the utility. Many utilities have those types of rooms if there's a tornado, floods, those types of things, so that they can operate basically the utility out of a room like that. So that would be the configuration C, which wasn't put in here, but basically around the outside there would be tables for a number of different operational units within the community that could use that. Configuration B would be more for a board meeting, and that would be used from time to time when the commission would meet there. And then configuration A would be for when we have training or safety meetings or other staff meeting type things. And we do have training and safety meetings monthly, at least monthly, and the quarters that they have at the water plant are at our new water plant are pretty tight for the number of employees that we have there. So, but Joe,
and I think this would also be used for an emergency operations center potentially during, for example, flood type situations and those types of things. We'd at least have the availability of that facility.
We were the backup site this last time, and we didn't have great space for the emergencies during that time, but this will just add to that. So,
and I thought, like I said, would be to also have maybe the city, if the city needed space, it would be the emergency center.
Yep, and it would be available. I mean, it really is fortified. I mean, we will do a tour out there when it's done, but it's on the inside of a concrete building, and it actually has block walls around it. So, Joe, I should be letting Joe talk a little bit.
I don't know if there's that many questions we might have. Green?
I was just curious, how much have we spent on the new furniture, and has it been purchased by somebody in the Moorhead area, or?
We have not purchased it yet. We're just getting bids together right now,
Okay.
and we are taking some bids from Moorhead companies as well.
Good. I hope we consider them strongly. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions for Joe? I don't know if it's necessary. I just wanted to draw to everybody's attention. Yes, Les.
Well, since we brought Joe up, we're going to have to ask him a question.
Do you have a good one that you want to ask?
Absolutely. If it becomes the EOC, the Emergency Operations Center, either for MPS or for the city, county, and MPS, will there be enough network lines in there to service all of the equipment? Because I was part of setting up one a few years back.
I believe there will be. We worked with Kurt on that and staff, and we have 6 outlets in the floor for the configuration for a commission meeting. And along the north wall, we have outlets and Ethernet connections about every 5 feet apart.
Okay.
So we have a lot of capability, and we add extra pipes in there. We can add what we need.
Okay, the second question, if we hold MPS meetings over there and we want to broadcast them as we are tonight, I want to make sure that someone, Bill or you or Kurt, talk to Tony Tilton over at MCAM so that that we can broadcast from there with minimal disruption.
We will pass that on to Kurt.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Joe.
Were they good
Unless anybody-
questions?
Well, they were great questions,
Oh,
and
okay.
Joe did a nice job in answering them. Anybody else have any questions for Joe? Thank you, Joe. Bill, next item.
The next item is 9E.
Actually, 9D. the
Oh,
accept
excuse me,
report.
9D. And that really, I mean, we're going to have a rate hearing. We will be talking about that. However, we do a report. This is the second report, just kind of giving the highlights. Nancy is available for, the answering of any questions, but it's got a number of ratios. It has information on what our total budgets are and what we're looking at over the next few years. So we've got some projections in there as well. The Budget Committee, of course, has looked at all these numbers and all of these reports in quite a bit of detail. There's some discussion there about the transfer. Of course, we've got the Budget Committee meeting with the city regarding the transfer. Those are big numbers, and we're working to contain those. But this report is a good report. It's got a lot of information there that you should take a look at and study just a bit. So if there's any questions, we can certainly answer those.
Well, and we, since the Budget Committee people are here, are there any items that you want to discuss that are in the report? Either one of you.
Well, in the report and in the proposed budget, we're really trying to start addressing some of the infrastructure items that we need to take care of, starting probably with the water mains and the high service pumps around the water plant. The discussion we've had with our liaisons as well, are all around the fact that, we have certain expenses to make sure that we have a reliable system, and there's more and more expenses that we are encountering now. The plan always was that after we have paid off the water plant, which happened earlier this year or late last year, that we would then focus on, especially on the water side, on the water mains. As you guys, if you live in the neighborhoods, we have had 60-some breaks already. This year, it's probably going to close to 70 breaks at $5,000 a piece. That's a lot of money we're spending without adding an inch of new pipe. So, of course, there's disruption to the customers as well. The other big item we talked about is the amount of reserves that we have that have been going down. I shouldn't say dramatically, but too much because we have had expenses that we didn't expect, and we need to build those up. So as we're talking to the city as well, we're talking about the transfer, and we're talking about the budget needs that we have at this point. I was actually surprised when you actually see it in the pie chart. Of all the revenue we generate, we only spend about a quarter on running the utility. Half of it goes away to buy electricity. 20-some percent, 24% go into the transfer, and we're using the remaining 26% to actually run the facilities. That includes 200 miles of water pipe, for example. And to give you an idea how long it is, that is from here to the outlet mall in Albertville. If you take all of our water mains, that's all the way down there. And we unfortunately have about from here to Fergus Falls. We have water pipe in the ground that we need to replace, and water pipe in the ground that we cannot replace in 50 years. We need to do something earlier. So looking at all these expenses and looking at all the other items that we have, and we're trying to shift stuff around, we're trying to get funding from other sources, but unfortunately we're looking at a budget that may require us to increase our rates. That's never a good time, never a good thing, and never a good time, but again, we need to run a utility that runs reliable.
I think in terms of reliability, and Bill, you can correct me, the outages with Xcel Energy recently were an item in the forum, and I think that in terms of our outages, we were far, far below their experience.
Far below. On Monday, there was a front page article, and it was on the top of the fold, and on the very bottom, right-hand corner of that fold was some statistics, and if you don't mind, I'll just bring those up. Xcel was and there was numbers from last year, and there was numbers from the last 5 years average for reliability, and they use a statistic that basically is the number of minutes that the average customer is out of power in a year. And the article was about the North Dakota PUC wanting to get Xcel above 50 minutes or below 50 minutes of outages They are right now, last year they were at about 75. And on a 5-year average, they were about at 57, and the PUC's concerned about that. Now, Cass County Electric was another utility that was mentioned. They had a really good year last year, and they were at 47 minutes, but their average for the 5 years was 80 minutes. And ours, in comparison to the 75 and the 47, ours was 27 last year, and our 5-year average was 30 minutes. Now, we like those numbers because those are better than the other utilities here in town. We were just used as a comparison in those articles. So, good news.
David?
And those numbers are awesome. You know, they're fantastic. But 2 weeks ago when we met, you know, we looked at the rate study, and one of the numbers that isn't so great, the trending, you know, that we have, and you know, we're going to get into rates in a little bit, but in putting the budget together, again, we're looking at a historical trend that continues to bring us into parity in our rates with XL and other competitors around the area. It doesn't mean we've gotten uncompetitive, but we've gotten less competitive. And so as we start to talk about this tonight, and I know that we've got at least a couple of folks here tonight that are going to talk about the impacts of some of these increases that we are facing as a board and as a utility. So the sticky wicket is that we really have to deal with how that is affecting the community and how the community is going to be able to compete and do the things that we need to do to grow industry and to help our friends in the industry expand, and to take care of that residential customer that you know just doesn't want to see a lot of impact to their bill as well. So the balancing act begins you know tonight with the rate hearing, as well as then finishing through the work in the transfer discussion to figure out how it is that we're going to make all this come together. So the numbers are challenging. The capital needs, the capital replacement in particular over on the water side is critical, as Ralph already pointed out with the break. So the next several weeks should prove to be really quite interesting as we put all this together. And I'm anxious to hear from the folks that are here tonight to tell us about their needs as well.
You know, and in looking at the report that's sitting in front of us, the second item that is discussed, item 2, shows the prospective rate increases over the next several years. And it also talks about the streetlight utility that we were just discussing earlier with our council liaison. You know, it's one thing to equate the $1.75 impact per month on residential customers or whatever that will be. But have we taken a look at our largest customers or those customers who would be impacted by the commercial rates and what those impacts do? I mean, can we pull various customers out of the air, if you would, and say, okay, you take a shopping mall, take Sanford, take Eventide, take some of these larger customers. What, you know, the number here, 0.001 per kilowatt hour, doesn't say much to somebody like myself sitting here. What does that come to in dollars and cents monthly or on an annual basis? Do we have any numbers that we are ready to look at?
Well, we can pull together some numbers. It may not be time to do that because, for one, we may not have a streetlight utility.
Well, I understand that, but at the same time, we should have that information available to us so we can at least share it with people who are going to be making decisions that will impact this utility and our customers. And the sooner probably rather than the later.
Well, and the other reason why I say, you know, it may not be the time is because if the city keeps the utility themselves and runs the utility by the city, they're going to do the same thing that they have been doing, just send us a bill. And so there may not be a lot of change to large customers, i.e. the 0.001 cents per kilowatt hour, you know, that's in the report here wouldn't take effect.
Right.
That only is going to take effect, and it would only be for the first year if the city delegates the utility to the commission, which I think is probably 50-50 at best. I think they need to take a look at how they're going to do that.
Okay, I'm not the brightest bulb sitting up here, but What do you mean it will only impact the first year?
Well, because I
I'm
think,
thinking you're talking about two different issues here. You're talking about the streetlight utility. Or
Absolutely.
You're both talking about that?
Yeah, I'm
Oh,
talking
I'd
about
like
it
to
as
see
well.
the other one too, of the overall impact to larger customers.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You know, I have no idea what this .001 per kilowatt hour, I don't know what their costs are right now. How many kilowatt hours are being generated by that particular utility, number one. But number two, what's the impact going to be in dollars and cents in their budgets?
right,
And then you said it would only be impact the first year. I'm assuming if we get that utility and we are going to be billing for those services, that will continue each and every year thereafter.
Right.
it will.
So it won't be just a one-year impact.
I'm saying the methodology may change after that first year.
Now you're sounding like an engineer.
Well, we did a rate study, okay?
Okay.
Because this year we had the electric cost of service study. And, you know, the analysis that they did was basically, and Nancy, you're gonna have to help me if I get this wrong. What Tim Miller did, and he talked about this at the last meeting, was he just basically took out the charges that the large customers were paying now for the street lights based on the $600,000 or $700,000 that we're charging the city, and he equated that into a per kilowatt hour charge, which is
Right.
that .001.
Right.
Okay,
But
so they're not
But
paying.
each one of those customers, whether it's Anheuser-Busch, whether it is American Crystal, whether it's Eventide or whomever, that is also built into their tax structure because currently this is coming in as a part of the general revenues to the city, correct?
Correct.
So if this happens, there will be an additional charge to those customers.
Correct.
And that's what I'm asking for is, what is that impact on the business customers in this community?
Ken?
You're talking not only this year, but the ongoing impact.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and I can give you, I mean, Nancy, it's not a hard calculation.
It is for somebody like myself.
Well,
I
no,
don't
but
know
I
how
mean,
many kilowatt hours they use.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah, no,
assuming
I
it's
mean-
fairly high.
well, before we say that number out loud, I want everybody to understand that they're already paying that for street lighting now
In their taxes.
in their taxes.
Yes,
Right.
but if this happens come January 1st, there will be an additional rate charge that they're going to pay.
Well, it's not additional. It'll be the same as what they're paying right now. It'll just
But the
be,
taxes
No.
the taxes are not gonna go down.
That would be in their property taxes before. This will
Property
be
taxes-
additional.
Exactly. Property taxes are going to remain the same. This will be a new charge in addition to the property taxes. So there is an add-on.
right, but it's not for street lighting. So their street lighting rate is not going up.
Only
Their
residential
tax-
are going to pay additional?
No, their tax rate goes up, right?
Well, their tax rate goes up depending upon what, even if the city council says we're not going to have a tax levy, their taxes remain absolutely the same for that property
Right.
which is assessed based upon its valuation. That
Correct.
doesn't change. What does change is we have a new utility charge.
Correct.
Taxes will remain the same. Now we have a new utility charge. That's an increase. Unless
Correct.
I'm missing something here.
No, you're correct. I think we're both correct. We're saying two different things. I'm
No.
saying they're not gonna pay any more for their street lighting.
But they are.
But they are.
Another question, I don't see how the city council
Well-
can consider this until they know what it's going to cost these people. That has to be in the city council discussion.
And
I
that's
don't
sort of
think
what-
we don't want it later.
That's sort of why I was asking the question is, in order to consider the issue, they have to know the cost. And as I remember what Tim Miller was saying, we're talking $600,000 a year for that streetlight utility.
Right.
Correct? About 40% of that is being paid for by residential customers. The remaining 60% or vice versa is going to be paid for by the business customers.
Right.
Or
And-
300 and some $1,000.
And so
So that's a new cost.
Bush Agricultural Resources is about 5% of our revenues, so 5% of 600,000 is 30,000.
Okay?
So that's my rough number before Nancy tells me what the actual number is, if she wants to.
And I would assume that the gentlemen sitting out in the audience are very mindful of what the impact of a $30,000 charge is.
And what I'm saying is it's in their, it's in their taxes now. They're already paying for street lighting as part of
Right.
their
Yeah.
taxes. But their
Yeah.
taxes are going to go up. if
As
they
will the
separate-
rate.
if
So
they
will the rate.
Well, that's where we disagree.
I think in
the
our notes,
philosophy.
don't
How
you
can we
only,
disagree? Because
I don't know how you
we're
disagree.
talking about a new charge that will be passed on.
But it's not for street lighting. They're not, like, we're not increasing the cost of street lighting.
Are you saying then that commercial are not going to pay any extra fee on our bill, only residential? That's what you're saying.
They would
And
pay,
second, in your notes, you're only mentioning what it's going to cost 100 and some to our residential. I see nothing.
oh,
that's
your
gonna
speaker's
say-
not on.
Oh, it's not on? I don't see anything in here that tells what it's going to be for commercial. They are going to
Well,
be paying too, I assume.
Let me
Can we
let
talk to the bean
Nancy,
counter?
let me let Nancy explain it and maybe,
Nancy, would you enlighten us, please?
Nancy Lund, Admin and Finance Manager. I just wanted to add to the discussion a little bit that the overall impact to MPS or to our customers will be an additional 1.5% increase on their utility bill, on their electric charge over what we're projecting today or proposing in the rate hearing this evening. So right now, we're at 3.5% increase to cover our needs. If the costs for street lighting are not able to be captured from the city of Moorhead, if they're not going to reimburse us those costs, that's $600,000, will be added into our rate structure, and it will be the equivalent of an extra 1.5%
So it's additional charge.
revenues that need to be collected from Moorhead Public Service customers versus city of Moorhead taxpayers.
So it's an additional charge.
Yes.
Thank you. That's where I was going with this.
okay.
But all I want to know is, when we're talking to our friends from InBev, or we're talking to our friends from Sanford, or we're talking to Eventide, or whomever, we should be able to quantify what that number is going to be to them, what that impact is. And we have to know that. People like Mike have to know that.
Yep.
I mean, that's why when I saw this 0.001 per kilowatt hour, what does it mean to Joe businessman?
Well, I think Nancy described it well. The 1.5% increase is the number.
Okay. I didn't want to belabor it, but I just want to
I don't want to
understand it.
confuse it anymore by, what I was thinking, but
Okay.
that's a separate discussion. That's the complication between us and the city, I believe, on taxes going up versus rates going up.
Well, and I know that they're grappling with those issues as well, but I want it to be clearly understood what the impact will be.
And then I think it will make a difference based on whether they delegate it to the commission or they keep the utility for themselves.
Right.
Or if they don't make a utility at all and just continue with what they're
And
doing
like
right
Mike
now.
said, that's not even been discussed yet.
Right.
And that 600,000, let's play with that number, that we would need to charge to our customers, that's to cover our costs to run the streetlights, right, basically?
Right. Yep. Yep.
Okay.
So,
Anything else you want to discuss on this issue?
No, I think that was a question. If there's other questions, we certainly can,
Are there any other questions with regard to
Well-
the proposed budget?
and not to belabor it at all, but there is from a residential standpoint, there is an example bill at the end of this report, which is kind of interesting to look at. And Nancy can explain that as well, if you want. But that's really what customers will see on their bill
Okay.
and the monthly increases, so.
and maybe one point we should make too on the proposed rate increase, that about 2.5% are because our supplier costs have increased, correct?
2.5% will be going to purchase power. MRES, our power supplier, is increasing rates 5.5%. That equals to about a 2.5% rate increase to recover those costs.
And at this point, we are not aware of any rate increases for the next 2 years. There may be another rate increase, another cost increase from MRES in 17, I believe, 17 or 18, right?
We've
As
put
far as we know.
we've put a small increase in, it's probable from WAPA in 2015, and then 2016, I believe we've got increases from MRES again that year. So
Okay.
stable, fairly stable for a couple of years after 2014, and then some other increases will come about.
Okay.
One question too, from a procedural standpoint, if the city transfers the utility to us, we need to have a separate rate hearing on that, correct?
Correct.
Would we do that as a part of this rate hearing and adopt it as this could happen kind of a thing?
You could still talk about it could happen, but we would have a separate rate hearing for that.
Okay. Thank you, Nancy. Could I have a motion, please, to accept that proposed budget report?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same sign. That motion carried. That brings us down to item 9E, which is to accept a report on a possible amendment to the water service rules and regulations. Bill?
And this one, Chris Knutson can come forward to talk about this. And it was about a year and a half ago, I suppose, that we looked at this. We looked at changing our rules and regs for water-powered sump pumps, which use the water pressure of the utility in order to operate as a backup to a existing sump pump. And it's an ingenious little device. We suspect that people will want to use them. We've done quite a bit of investigation even since a year and a half ago. And Commissioner Anderson met with us previously. I think when we did it a year and a half ago, the commission said, let's get a committee together to talk with staff, work on this. We did have a meeting with Commissioner Anderson and talked about these. We don't have probably a firm recommendation. We have 3 options, but we need to just discuss this a little bit, and then you need to give us a little bit of direction.
I see we've got about 4 minutes before we go to our open meeting, and Chris has a show and tell for us. So we may have to
Suspend.
interrupt you in the middle of your discussion, or we can bring it up later. Take your pick.
Let's go with the interruption.
Okay?
Chris Knutson, Water Division Manager. So Bill did a nice job introducing the topic, and I think the scope of the discussion regarding water-powered sump pumps is really to provide a recommendation to staff going forward for how we want to treat these in our rules and regs. Back in late 2011 and early 2012, I'll go through a little bit of the history to provide some background, but during that amendment process, water-powered sump pumps were excluded from the water rules and regs, so we just decided we didn't want to include them in that process. So we've done a little bit more research, met with Mr. Anderson a couple times, talked to the City of Moorhead codes as well, and basically come up with a few options. I'll just briefly describe how the water-powered sump pump works first, and then I think we can discuss the options after the rate hearing. So I'll briefly talk about how they work. And basically, the water-powered sump pump is used as a backup to a normal sump pump. So you've got like your normal sump pump sitting right here. This actually sits above it. And what happens is the water in your sump pump pit starts to rise when the power goes out. So once that starts rising, actually this float triggers a gate valve, and your city water pressure comes in through this faucet adapter, comes in, and then is ejected and discharged either outside or to the sanitary sewer. How it pumps water from this point right here is that a vacuum is created, and that water is essentially pulled out. So it's a relatively very simple concept, and it uses quite a bit of tap water to create that suction. So about 1 gallon of water is used for every 2 gallons that are pulled out of that sump pit. So, for example, if you run it for 10 minutes or so, it can use between 50 and 100 gallons of tap water. So it can use quite a bit. But I think I'll interrupt myself there, and we'll come back.
Your timing is very good, Chris. Thank you.
Not a problem.
Okay. We're about to get into the rate hearings for both electric and water. And before opening this up for the open meeting or the open hearings, I will read the rules of conduct for our rate hearing for those of you who'd like to hear them. The bylaws indicate as follows. No rate change shall be adopted by the commission unless the commission first holds a public hearing affording all affected parties a chance to participate. A notice of said hearing shall be published in the official newspaper of the city at least 14 days prior to the date set for the hearing. The notice shall indicate the purpose for, the time, date, and place of the hearing. The hearing shall be conducted by the president or a member selected by the commission. At the hearing, the commission and its staff shall present the facts establishing the need for and the reasonableness of the proposed rate change. Sufficient time shall be allowed to enable all interested parties to be heard but the commission shall determine when all relevant testimony has been presented or when testimony has become repetitious. Testimony will be considered only after a speaker has been recognized and has identified himself. For the 30 days subsequent to the closing of the hearing and prior to the adoption of a rate change, written testimony shall be received and considered by the commission. The commission may grant extensions prior to the adoption of the rate change if it finds that additional testimony is necessary or productive. After all relevant testimony has been submitted, the commission shall adopt rates which it determines to be necessary and reasonable, including the effective date, and cause the same to be published in the official newspaper of the city. And for those of you at home who cannot attend for whatever reason or choose not to attend but still want to make comments, you can send those comments to the commission. I can assure you that this commission reads each and every comment that is presented to us. We do take them into consideration, and we try to be reflective of the thoughts and objectives of the general public who constitute our ratepayers. That having been said, I would like a motion to open the rate hearing.
I move we open the rate hearing.
Could I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We have now begun the rate hearing for purposes of discussing electric rates. Bill?
And you can see on the screen, we've got some slides. I'll go through the slides for the electric rates, and then we'll open that up for comments. For the audience that's here, if they, the slides are in the back of the room if you need a copy of those slides. And if anyone needs a copy, they can raise their hand and we'll have staff get you a copy. Otherwise, I'll just assume that you've already gotten those. Yep, at the front of the room here, there's extra copies as well. So, but they may have gotten them when they came in.
If anybody does want to make public comments after Bill has completed the information from our staff, I would ask that they come down to the podium and introduce themselves, and we'll take those comments. Thank you.
Okay, the first slide really is just talking about how rates are determined, and this year we actually had a cost of service study, we call it. The electric rate study or cost of service study basically looks at what all the costs that that we have that you know that are within the utility, and then they basically take a look at how we can equitably transfer to those that cause all those costs. So there's, you know, capacity issues, and then there's volume issues that are looked at, and there's different classes of customers, and we look at how they use the, you know, use those resources that we're providing, and then we select costs based on that. On the electric side, we do a cost service study by policy every 5 years, and we've done those for a number of years. So that's just what we do there. We do have long-range plans, and we take a look at those. We do our purchase power cost forecasts. We've got operating expenditures that happen annually. We look at our capital improvement plans, and we talked about those previously at our meeting here just a little while ago. And then reserves as well was discussed. So we have policies and we have plans for all of those things, and we pull that all together for our rates. We do an annual in-depth review, and Nancy Lund's staff pulls together all those numbers, and we take a look at those. The budget committee meets and talks about those as well. This year we do have a rate increase proposed for the electric utility. In the next couple of years, we're hoping to keep that to 0. So that's what we're looking at. We have a public hearing, and then we have a final approval in December. So that's just a overview, a little bit of what we do on an annual basis. Now I'm going to try and move to the next slide. It worked. Okay. For the rate study that I talked about, that cost of service study, for what we're looking at is a 3.5% increase in 2014, basically to recover costs from our purchase power suppliers that are raising their fees, and then to cover capital expenditures. We have an increase in monthly customer charges, and we have a new multiple meter charge for customers with more than one meter at their service point, their location. That will affect dual fuel customers in Moorhead. Well, it worked the first time. Oh, there we go. Did I go two? Sorry. Well, for the commercial and industrial customers, we've got a rate increase again of 3.5%, so it's the same across the board. There is increase in monthly customer charges, which will affect those that have less volume, more so than those that have a larger volume. And we have new seasonal energy rates in the general service and small general service classes. That's something new because we're getting seasonal rates from our power suppliers. We are passing those seasonal rates on to our customers. And again, there's new additional meter charges for those that have more than one meter at a service point. The slide here might be just a little difficult to read. This just breaks down the services, the charges for electric rate increase. For a residential customer charge is going up from $9.70 to $10.70 per month. The energy charge in the June through August time period goes from 0.092 or 9.2 cents to just over 10 cents. And then the energy charge for September through May, so the winter period, just doesn't go up as much. So we're phasing in seasonal rates, which are higher in the summertime than they are in the wintertime. And you'll see some of the numbers. We use an average residential customer of using 850 kilowatt hours per month. And if they use that every month, it would go up $8.65 in the June through August time period and $1.85 from October through May. Here we have for small general service and for the general service, which is our largest customers, we have a similar type of information. And we, again, have customer charges, and then we have energy charges for June through August and September through May. And you can see those, I won't go through the numbers in detail, but the numbers go up more so in the summertime than in the wintertime. Again, that phasing of those seasonal rates in. For general service, there's primary service and there's secondary service. Primary service is customers who choose to provide their own transformation for their voltage. And so the larger customers tend to do that. And then there's an energy charge for secondary service, which is just a bit different. There's demand and energy charges. The demand charges are for a more capacity charge, and energy charges are the volume that they use. We've got, in this one, we've got a power cost adjustment. This is an adjustment that we don't expect to use very often. If there was an ice storm that happened, like it happened in 2007, you could expect to see an increase in the mid-year. This is more so just a good planning item that the commission should implement or was recommended to implement by Moody's Investor Service. So we're just implementing that. So the proposed rate, since it's a brand new rate, there's a base of 4.5 cents, and then there's a bandwidth. So our power suppliers would have to raise the annual power cost in excess of 4.7 cents per kilowatt hour before we would implement that, and that would be quite a large increase on an annual basis. So again, we don't expect that to happen very often.
Bill,
Yep.
what would be your, what steps would you take to implement that in case that scenario came about? Is that, are you coming to us then? And
Yeah, we would come to the commission.
So we don't have anything automatic
Right.
in this proposal then that would just
Right, and we
trigger?
Right, and we have, the procedure would be to bring it to the commission would consider it. they would not have to have a rate hearing such as we did in 2007. Not that a rate hearing is all that onerous to provide. You still would probably talk about it quite a bit and welcome input, but you technically wouldn't have to have a formal hearing. It just makes it a little bit easier to do, but I don't know if that answered your question.
So this is a fail-safe kind of a thing?
Yeah, I mean, it really is more of a recommendation for, you know, to keep our bond rating secure. This is one of the items that they had as a weakness for us. I think really procedurally it's not much different than the way you would operate anyway if you're going to do a rate hearing. It's just that on your books you've got a mechanism that's easier to implement than a formal rate hearing.
Yeah. I guess my point is, I occasionally have to remind myself I'm sitting here as a customer. I'm not sitting here, you know, as necessarily a member of your team. You know,
Right.
So you know, we're a board, but we're customers first, representing, you know, customers. So that's why I ask questions like that.
Yep.
Because if we got to that point, it just seems to me that we'd want to do something that is completely transparent, out in the open, you know, so that we're.
Well, I know at least
Yep.
this commissioner, if I were still on the board and that happened, I would want a rate hearing. So I don't even know if we want to, good Lord knows we want to keep the investor services happy, but at the same time, I don't know if I'm necessarily interested in doing this if we're going to have a rate hearing anyway, if we show a willingness to do it.
Well, and you could also require a rate hearing even though you have a purchase cost adjustment. You could have in your procedures
I would feel
to do
far
it.
more comfortable saying that we have this in our rate structure, but that would not be implemented without a rate hearing. And if we have to adopt a policy to that extent so the general public has an opportunity to come in and tell us what they think about it.
Yep. No, I think that's perfectly,
So would this have come into effect, for example, when we had the large increases due to the tremendous ice storm down in Nebraska a few years ago?
correct.
Okay. Now, people have to understand that when those large ice storms occurred, that utilities effectively are self-insured to the extent that they have to go down there and make those repairs with no insurance payments coming in the door. And so the utility companies pass on those expenses when they are incurred. And we don't have enough money in reserves to meet those costs if we have a catastrophic type situation. Go ahead, Bill.
Next slide is the impact to an average residential customer, and we base that on about 850 kilowatt hours per month, which is approximates our average. The customer charge, like I mentioned, goes up $1 per month. Based on 850 kilowatt hours, the electric consumption charge would be about $2 per month, so it's a little bit over a $3 increase per month for the average residential user. What is it funding? I mentioned previously we've had a cost of service study. We're looking at capital improvements of $17.7 million over the next 5 years. As Commissioner Maynard-Meeland mentioned, upgrading aging infrastructure for that reliability, and then extending services to newly annexed areas, meaning Oakport, those types of things. We've got those dollars in there as well. And then replenish and increase cash reserves over a period of 4 years. The commission has a policy on reserves that we're using to give us some guidance on that as well. Where does the money go? This is the pie chart that was referred to. Over half of our charges go to purchase power, or half of the revenues that we collect. The second largest is the city transfer. That's roughly 21% right now, and as we mentioned, there's a meeting tomorrow to talk about the transfer and ways we can manage that over time. Some of the smaller pieces of the pie include any internal financing we do of capital items, salaries, just other is less than 3%, and then principal and interest and increasing reserves of about 4%. So those are some of the expenses or where the money goes.
And maybe we should talk about the reserves for a second, because it's always a question, you know, why you put money in reserves? Why can't you just not put money in reserves? And that is actually a big item for us sitting up here. We are supposed to be at about 150 days on the reserve side. We were at 130 about 2 years ago. We're at 109 now. And the reserves are for events like the big ice storms and what have you. So it's not that we're trying to put a lot of money into the reserves, but we need to be in a situation where we can actually take money out of the reserves to do the things we need to do. So even though it's 4.3% to increase them, what we're actually doing is we're going back to where we should be, and we are far away from where we should be, industry average and other items as well. So I just want to make that point as well. It's a big issue to discuss and consider.
Well, and the same thing goes with purchase power for people to understand that Moorhead Public Service does not generate its power that we sell to the public. We actually have to go out into the marketplace and buy it, and we have two sources. One would be WAPA, or Western Area Power Administration, and the other would be from Missouri River Energy Resources. And we are their largest customer, if I'm not mistaken. But that's what purchase power means. That's the power that we buy and in turn sell to our customers. Bill?
The next slide basically has our past 10 years of rates and then a couple years going forward. You can see during that ice storm period in 2007, we actually had to have two rate increases in 2007. That was that we had a rate hearing in the middle of the year type of thing. And then in 2008, 2009, we also had large increases. Again, that was to replenish and to pay for the cost of replacement power during that ice storm. Then we came down to the more cost of living type adjustment increases of 4 and 2, and then now we're looking at a 3.5% increase. And then again, we're looking at we've forecasted 0% increases for the next 2 years. But that, again, is dependent on our discussions with the city regarding the transfer. So, how do we compare it to other utilities? We've got a pie chart here that shows in the blue, you've got our current rates against the current rates of the other utilities. And then on the very left-hand side is the proposed rates. And then you can compare that to the rates of the other utilities around us. And I know that I just saw in the paper here a couple days ago, XL in Minnesota was raising their rates, I believe 4.5%, and then they were going to raise them again next year. So these are continuing to move upward. So we just want to make sure ours don't move any faster than theirs. So. And
is this the first time that we'll actually be higher than XL and Fargo?
It depends on where their rate increases fall in the next year. I think they do have some proposed increases as well on the North Dakota side to improve reliability and those such things. So, but as of right now, our 2014 rates are higher than their 2013 rates. So, but we're right about on par with XL Energy right now. And we were a decade ago, we were, I believe it's 30% less than them. So, or 20. I shouldn't. Anyway, we've caught up with them in the near term. I should mention too, and that was in the XL article that I read. They're doing a lot of infrastructure improvements to their nuclear plants, to their power plants. If you drive along interstate down to the Twin Cities, you can see a lot of transmission that's going up right now. So all of those things are going to continue to put upward pressure on everyone's rates. And so again, we're trying to make sure our rates don't rise any faster than theirs and try and remain competitive and keep them down as much as we can. That is all I have for that, for the slides.
Is there anybody in the general public that'd like to come forward and make some comments? We'd entertain those comments at this time. Come on down. Please identify yourselves. You will be on television, and we want everybody to know who you are.
Hello, Judd Carlson, Bush Agricultural Resources. I'm the plant manager at our Moorhead malt plant.
Okay.
I have some handouts I'd like to pass out to the commission if I can.
You want to just give them to Casey? Casey will take care of that for you.
Good evening. My name is Ralph Judd. I'm the Director of Raw Materials for Anheuser-Busch in St. Louis, and I manage our vertical operations in North America, of which Moorhead is one of my facilities. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you because we have some big concerns about this and our operation here. Again, thank you. Between all of our utilities we purchase from the city of Moorhead and the taxes to the city, it's approximately $3 million a year. The discussion earlier on what's the impact to us, we're looking at it about $100,000 to $130,000 a year. And that's a huge increase as we strive to keep this plant competitive. I've been visiting Moorhead in Fargo area since 1979. I have a pretty long career in the brewing industry, and it's always been a great place to visit. You guys have been fabulous a partner as we've grown this facility from 6 million bushels to 7.5, and we hope to continue to grow. It was originally built in 1978. Last year we shipped almost 1,700 rail cars and 170 trucks of malt. There's a slide in there where the Red River Valley barley ends up. And we've been focusing on considerable improvements in the facility to be competitive. And also, we're very proud we've gone 3 years without any lost time accidents at that facility. That's one of the best safety records in our entire corporation worldwide. If we go to, I won't go through the whole presentation. We'll have some of it we'll respond to in the written. But the slide that shows industry costs and capacity is one of my biggest concerns. And there, Moorhead competes for our discretionary volume within our company. Internally, we make about half our malt, and we purchase the other half. And my job is to have the highest quality, but also the lowest cost. Otherwise, I'm not competitive, with our procurement teams. And unfortunately, I had to go through some of the worst efforts of my entire career 2 years ago when I had to close one of my plants in Manitowoc, Wisconsin. That facility had been operating since 1848. And in this chart, that would be the AB producer at 64 cents net a bushel, and we had to close it. And that was a real heartbreaking experience. So this chart is without having the real cost of malt. It's starting at zero with AB producer. That's our baseline. That's our best cost in the system. And then we get from several other commercial suppliers, 2 of them Minnesota, one of them in central North Dakota, and also in Montana. And these rate increases almost average out to about 2 cents a bushel. Now, it's the additive cost year on year that is the challenge to us. And so 2 cents on our 61 gets us very close to that Manitowoc number. And I do not want to get close to that number. The team here, Judd Carlson and his team, have done an absolute fabulous job reducing costs and managing the facility the last 3 years because they were one of the highest cost producers in North America, and they got themselves into the game and stayed in service. To reduce our energy demand, half our workforce went on the off shifts. So we took our electricity demand and spread it over 24 hours instead of having a high impact of the demand all on day shift. We're in our efforts to better world, reduce our water usage. We reduced our water usage by over 30%. And if you go to some of the charts, we didn't get any savings out of reducing our water because the rates went up. We didn't reduce our energy demand and our energy usage. The rates went up. So, if you can look at this, and I'd be glad to discuss with anybody, at another time or on the phone instead of going through exact detail of each and every point of this. But we do have some real concerns, but we want to continue operating this plant. It's one of the finest malt plants in the world. I've been in 45 malt plants around the world. I've traveled extensively. Unfortunately, it's relatively small from a malting standpoint at 7.5 million bushels. You got Spiritwood in central North Dakota is 28 million. Our friends across the state in Minneapolis, Shakopee, that's 24 million. So they have size that helped us. And we would really strive to expand this plant. We have plenty of barley here. We have great farmers. We get the raw materials. But if we're always looking at 3.5% increases every year, when we're trying to manage our budget and manage our cost, and this is a big increase, and it's a year-on-year increase. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments, and quite frankly, your operation has always been a very good corporate partner with us, and was instrumental in the construction of what we consider to be one of the best water treatment facilities in this part of Minnesota, and we want to keep you here for a long time.
Thank you.
And just for everyone's information, Bush Agricultural Resources in Moorhead is our largest water user, far and away largest water user, about 20% of our total. And then on the electric side, they're one of the top 4, and they're about 5% of our capacity on the electric side. So we call them a very important power user, part of our VIP program, and we try and do everything we can to make sure that we're a good partner with you. And
Quite frankly, these
thanks for your
materials
comments.
are rather staggering when we take a look at them and look at what you have to do in order to compete with other suppliers. It's something that we definitely will take a look at.
Thanks, sir.
And also, you know, I mean, you are on our minds as we go to the budget. I mean, we're talking about you and some other big customers as well. So we are aware of what the rate increase, what impact it has, and this will help us a lot to actually put a number to it. Yeah.
Okay. Does anybody else have any comments that they'd like to make? Yes, sir, come on down. Please identify yourself.
Ray Ellers, 1704 18th Avenue South. Ray Ellers. And 1704 18th Avenue South. Yep. I get bills from Moorhead Public Service from the range between $280 and $800 a month. We have a home-based business that requires power in the wintertime and with the plenum heater and keeping the garage warm for storage, things like that. Back when I installed my plenum and my garage heat, the kilowatts was 4.4 cents a kilowatt. Over the years, I've kind of kept track of different rates, and granted the 10-year history and the projected outlook for what the increases are here, but it doesn't show the increases in the city transfer. Back a number of years ago when I looked, it was over $6 million, and it was about a 6% increase. That hasn't been addressed here other than the point where it says 20.7% on, according to this year. I have no idea what it is now, but I'm sure it's well over the $6 million.
It is, and quite frankly, Nancy, do you have that number at your fingertips?
Right. And I feel that this is a hidden tax on the residents of the city of Moorhead. If you have $6 to $8 million over and above and are looking for infrastructure and funding, and for ice storms and residual things like that, that's quite a bit. And I don't know how you arrange for the city transfer or how you do that, but that's a big chunk.
And
Just-
to be, okay, sorry.
No, what did you say?
Yeah, to make a point, and you make a very good point, and be aware of that. And the budget you're looking at, the number you're looking at, does not include an increase in transfer. And that's what we're talking to our city liaisons as well, how to do that. But you know, the attempt right now, at least with what we are looking at today, is to keep that increase flat. But we don't know how the discussions will go with the city.
But I feel that over the years, it's been a hidden tax, and it's increasing probably more than what your increases are on the electric side and the water side. And so how can you keep snowballing and advancing more money out there? And evidently, Moorhead Public Service is a profitable enterprise. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to do that.
Perhaps I can address your question with regard to how we establish that transfer. This body does not establish that transfer. The city charter for the city of Moorhead allows the city council to set a number based upon the gross revenues of the utility. And effectively what happens is the city council sets how much they want to transfer and sends us a number, and we work on that. So that's how the process works. We are very mindful of the impact of that particular item in our budget, because it's a large item in our budget, as is the city council. And that's one of the reasons why we're working with our liaison, Mr. Hewlett, and another member of the city council, to arrive at a discussion so that we can manage what to do with that particular aspect of our budget. And in all honesty, this has been a matter that we have discussed every year. We know that that's a large item in our budget, and we do want to control it. That's our purpose here.
It's 2.5 times the budget of your wages and benefits for your employees, so that's a big number.
That pie chart tells a story.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
David Givers, 205 6th Avenue South. I won't belabor it, but the reason I came here was to just talk about that same subject of the city transfer. It impacts everybody, and it's something that really, and I know that you just mentioned that you don't really control that, but we can. I did learn now that it's not in these actual rates here. The city will make that judgment, or the city council will make that judgment later. So it does have a big impact, and it does other things too. And I'll come back at another time to talk some more about this. But
You're free to come anytime, but you have to understand when you look at our costs, that number is in our costs, and we look at that entire pie, if you will, in determining what our rate structure has to be.
okay,
So the transfer is in there,
okay,
and that's part of what we do.
good.
But again, the 3.5% for this year do not include an increase in the transfer.
No, that's true.
Okay, so if the city came to us, for example, and said we wanted more money, we would likely have to increase the rates. Because we only have this much money to play with and run a utility that actually is reliable.
It's actually somewhat related in a way, because you were also being requested to put a tax, or whatever you want to call it, a service fee on our power lights, city street lights. And that's another form of city transfer. And somehow or other the city found they didn't have to do that. But again, it's impacting what this public utility could really do to create generating capacity. And that's one of the things I want to talk about at some point, because we really need to move to more renewable energies faster. And there are good reasons for that. But thank you for your time, and thank you for actually working on this commission. I know it takes a lot of your time, and you do a lot of reading, and it's a big help to the city.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to come forward? Pat?
Since he's talking about, I'm Patrick J. McCann, 1508 36th Street South. The meeting before this hearing, the regular meeting, you were talking about rate increases a little bit, and then we talked about the street light thing they were talking about. And if I understood that right, if the city gives up their responsibility of paying the public service for the street light, they're going to have, like the gentleman before me said, they're going to have to put a fee on for the charge. And the charge I heard was going to be like a 1.5% fee, because the city doesn't want to raise taxes. The city always wants to just give fees so they can say they do not raise taxes. And you don't have the option of saying you're not raising rates, because you have to say you're raising rates. So I understood it that basically if the city gives up that responsibility, we're going to have to pay 5%. Wasn't that what?
No, I don't think that was it, Pat.
Because you have a 3.5%, and then you were saying like
yes,
1.5% to cover up if the city gives up their responsibility for street lighting.
Yes, you're correct.
So then we're actually looking at a 5%.
That's correct. Mrs. Stephenson?
You are correct, because now it's included in your property taxes from the city.
Right.
And you're not, if they transfer that to us, you will not have it lowered in your property tax. It will be an additional charge that we're going to be required to charge our customers.
Right. And you talked about
the
commercial people, you know, that's 1.5% on them too. You know, you're asking 5%. I think that's, you know, quite a bit.
And that was, you make a good point, that was my question.
There's a lot, you know, there's some people that were driving here that didn't get to hear that 1.5% charge that, and you can call it what you want. I would still call that another $5,600,000 transfer to the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Would anybody else like to come forward and make any comments with regard to the proposed electric rates? Now's the time to do so. Okay, and as I mentioned a few moments ago when I read the rules for the conduct of our rate hearing procedure, that we will accept written comments for the next 30 days. whether it's by email to any one of us or a mail directly to Moorhead Public Service, we will look at those. We do see them. They go out in our packet. It is part of our deliberations, and I can assure you that the two gentlemen on either side of me who serve on our budget committee have been working on this particular matter for a long time. We take, they do a lot of time in doing the review of our budget, line item by line item by line item. And before we have a rate increase, these two have to agree to it, and they will make those recommendations. I also know that the city is doing the same thing on their side. We will be more than happy to hear from the general public. And as Mr. Giver said a few moments ago, he may want to come back to see us again. We always have space on our agenda for citizens to be heard, and you're welcome to come before this body at any time. Could I have a motion, please, to close the electric rate hearing?
I so move.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We have now closed the electric rate hearing, and we'll take those comments into consideration. Could I have a new motion to open the water rate hearing?
I move we open the water rate hearing.
Okay, could I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The water rate hearing is now open for discussion. Bill, do you have a presentation you want to make?
We have a very similar presentation on the water increases, and I was going to mention, you mentioned sending emails to Moorhead Public Service. The address to send that to would be mps@mpsutility.com. So just so everybody's aware of that at home. First slide here, basically this a similar outline to what we talked about before. We do cost service studies. We did one in 2012, so that one's very fresh. We also look at all of our long-range plans, operating expenditures, capital improvements, reserve requirements, similar type of things as we talked about for the electric side. We do an in-depth annual review. We do a rate proposal. We have a public hearing, and then we do the final approval in December so that we can have rates done for January 1st. The proposed rate increase on the water side is a 3% increase. The average residential customer would see an increase of 52 cents per month. What you see in the table is a number of different meter sizes. However, most homes have a 3/4 inch service and a 3/4 inch meter. Older homes would have a 5/8 inch meter, and then larger customers have larger water meters, and those services are based on that. The table is based on those types of services. The next table, again, similar to on the water side, just breaks it up into our seasonal usage. And just like on the electric side, there's different costs for different times that you use water. We have to size our system for fire protection and for basically lawn sprinkling, domestic use and lawn sprinkling, but the system is sized for that. In Minnesota, they actually are requiring us to have conservation rates based on the capacity that we have for summer water use, and you'll see we have conservation rates there. For a residential customer, in May through October, the 2013 rate is $3.10 per 100 cubic feet. The proposed rate is 14 cents more, about a 4.5% increase. The conservation rate is for any usage that's over 150% of the winter average. So we take the winter months and we average that out, and if your usage is more than 150% above that, so there's some consideration for lawn watering, but then there is a additional or a higher fee for any water use that's over 150% of the winter average. There's a new charge for irrigation meters, which is the conservation rate. And then we break up our classes into apartment, commercial, and industrial, and those rates are all shown there. Yep.
What is a residential irrigation?
It's a rate, and it's a separate meter that just is on the sprinkling system. So there are some residents that have a separate irrigation meter, So they have 2 meters in their home, one for domestic use and one for irrigation.
We're already charging them an additional rate for summertime.
Well, that's a good question. On the
Thank you.
on the domestic meter, I would guess that, you know, the rate would still go into effect, but they would have to use, 50% more than their winter average, and that would be rare on if they have an irrigation meter.
Well, speaking for somebody who has an irrigation system, I can tell you it wasn't all that rare this past year. But the question is, aren't we doubling up on some charges there by adding that?
No, because if they have a separate meter, it won't be going through both meters. It'll go through one or the other. It'll go
Okay.
through one or the other. Yeah.
So the idea is you wouldn't hit the 150% because you have 1 meter separate.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so back to the slides. We have fire protection for 2014. We are phasing in fire protection charges. This is a 3 or 4 year phase-in of fire protection charges on the bill. This is a city charge, and so we're passing this on to the city. And you can see the increase is large, but it's basically a phase-in of what the rates should be based on our cost of service study.
So this is similar to what we're doing, or what may happen on a street light, correct? We just
It
took over
is-
certain service.
Yep, it's very similar to that. Yep. Yep, but it is phased in. And it is something that you can consider on the streetlight side too, is phasing it in, over a period of time. Instead of a 1.5% increase all at one time, you phase it in.
But if we phase it in, we need to find the money somewhere because we have the cost associated, because we're gonna only charge the cost on the utility, on the streetlight utility, right?
Right. I was talking about the city phasing in, not us phasing in.
Oh.
If they pass that on to us, I would guess that we would pass that on directly. Good questions. So the fire protection rates, again, are shown here. Not going to spend a lot of time on those. Customers would see that on the bottom of their bill under the city charges. The proposed rate increases then, for an average residential customer, the customer charge is going up just slightly, 10 cents. The commodity charge is going up about 40 cents per 100 cubic feet, or about 42 cents is the net impact. The total impact, an average residential bill in 2013 would be about $27. That would go up by roughly 52 cents to $27.54. So the average customer on the water part of their bill would see an increase of 52 cents. What is the increases funding? Basically capital improvement. There's a number of items. As was mentioned earlier in our meeting, we've paid off the water plant, the new water treatment plant. The bonds are paid off in that. However, we have water main replacement that needs to be looked at, and we have high service pumping at the water plant that also needs to be done. And then there's other items that we'll be working on as well. So those are detailed there. Yep.
I'm just going to back you up just for a moment to a similar point that we made with the electric hearing. I'd like to understand beyond the 52 cents for the typical residential customer, what the impacts are to our significant commercial users who are also economic drivers for the community and employers and such, because I've seen some of those numbers as we've talked about some of the impacts, and the folks from Anheuser-Busch have left already, but part of their presentation, I can't speak for them, but I'm just going to react a bit to one of the pages on their presentation. They show us the efficiencies that they've achieved at their plant, yet our water rates are really, really impacting their ability to compete in their marketplace. And so I think before we finalize our work, I really want to have an understanding of of those major players. It's easy to say 52 cents.
Right.
But then I know that this is translating into thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars for these folks that they're also our businesses and employers.
I want to remind everybody sitting up here. That a couple of years ago, we sat here when we were talking about these rate increases, and we discussed the closing of the Manitowoc plant and how quickly that happened, its impact upon Manitowoc, and its potential impact upon Moorhead if a similar situation occurred here. And so the information that was provided to us tonight by Anheuser-Busch is really quite amazing in terms of its impact these creeping rates have on those businesses, and the fact that we're dealing with a multinational firm that could close a plant here very quickly. And we have to be mindful of that. And Mike, I don't want to belabor any points with you, but I would appreciate it if we could get extra copies of this so you could share this with your colleagues on the city council. Okay. Bill?
And maybe along those lines too, I mean, one of the comments that the gentleman made from Anheuser is that really piqued my interest is the ability to maybe increase production, right? So if that were the case, then maybe we should look at that, look at that as well from a city perspective, on an incentive perspective as well.
And the other part of that was that this is a relatively small plant in their whole scheme of operation. And I didn't realize that until you mentioned that tonight, so please.
Continue. I did go back a few slides just to show in a little more detail the bottom two sections, the commercial and industrial classes. The industrial class would be the Bush Agricultural Resources. They're, again, seasonal rates. Their May through October would go up 7%, and that's really because their winter numbers are not going up at all. So on average, and they're pretty consistent month by month. They even day by day, they're pretty flat-lined, straight, use the same amount of water all the time. And so they would see about a 3.5% increase. I do think, and we have talked with Bush Ag about expansion, and they are preparing for looking at an expansion. And Mr. Judd is their, director of raw materials, and he's the one that's calculating those things. So it was good to listen to him, good to see him at this meeting, but I think the message is clear that we need to be paying attention to what he's saying. And I do think, and we have talked to them about incentives. They are our largest water user, and of course, if they increase water use, they will be paying, more for water. And we have a lot of fixed costs in our water system, so that actually would drive the rate down. So an incentive for a few years would be something that you should take a serious look at. So I hope they continue to seriously look at expansion. Okay, back to the other slides. We've got the pie chart here. This one is a little bit more distributed, a little more, evenly, I guess. Our biggest variable cost is the chemicals. Chemicals are about 15%. We've got 30% on this one is salaries. 24% is capital items, not financed. And then we have others, principal and interest, increased reserves. And so there's the pie chart. If there's any questions, I can answer those. But
what's our revenue mix from electric compared to water?
Pardon me, our what?
The revenue mix, how much of our revenue comes from electric versus water?
Oh, I should know off the top of my head. What are for 2014? Okay, 35 million for electric and 6 for water.
So that everybody understands that Moorhead Public Service is one organization, but we actually operate two separate utilities, one for water, one for electricity, and those are both their own profit centers.
Historical increases, basically, cost of living except for 2008, and now we are looking at a 5% in 2016, again to fund basically water main replacement activities. We're really looking at stepping those up, and we're still investigating that, so.
Bill, for the sake of folks either listening in or in the audience, talk about the water main replacement again. Talk about the trending that we're seeing now in main breaks and how we've kind of hit the bottom of our efficiency, and we're starting to tick back up toward some inefficicies.
Yeah, I'll paraphrase, and
Okay.
if we need Chris Knutson to come up and fill in the blanks, we'll have him do that, our water division manager. But basically, we've been spending about the same dollar amount, which means in a nominal point of view, we've actually decreased in the amount of water main we've replaced dollar-wise over the past 20 years. So we actually in the mid-'80s we started a very aggressive water main replacement program, and then really didn't increase the dollar amount we used for a number of years. And so we did that for the reasons that we didn't want to increase the dollar amount because we were paying for a water treatment facility. And now that the water treatment facility is paid for, the committee is looking at basically a fourfold increase in the dollars for water main replacement. And that basically brings us up to the industry nationwide average of water main replacement that the industry feels is a minimum in order to maintain a system. And that number is 1%. And that means that every 100 years you're replacing your system. The primary focus is our cast iron mains, which Commissioner Maynard-Meelan mentioned earlier is about here to Fergus Falls in the amount of cast iron main that we have. And so that's the first priority, and we will be working on that very hard. But and we do have a system of prioritizing our replacement based on our water main breaks. I think that was the final point of your question, Dave, was the water main breaks, how are they? And they are up, and the trend is up. It's just starting to go up. I hope it doesn't end up being exponential. I hope it flattens out. But we have seen large increases in the past couple of years in our water main breaks.
The important thing for the public to understand is even if we go on this, quote, aggressive, end quote, water main replacement plan, it's still 100 years to replace what we want to replace.
Right, right.
Even though, yeah, we've been doing a couple miles a year, and we find that's
half a mile a year.
or a half mile a year, and we want to get more, but it's going to take that long to actually replace. And once we finish with the cast iron, then we move on to the asbestos and concrete. And so we do have a lot of work ahead of us.
And I think between the two, between cast iron and asbestos concrete, we have the 50 miles. So if we go on the current rate, it would take us 100 years, right, to replace that 50 miles.
25. If we go, well, at the current rate,
at the
yeah,
current half
100
mile
years.
rate, right? And the stuff is not going to last.
No, we can't
I mean,
sustain
it's
that.
not going to work. So even going to 2 miles a year, which is 1%, it will still take us 25 years to replace those two pieces of infrastructure.
Correct.
So, it has to be done.
And we really hope that, and they'll be doing studies over the next number of years on PVC pipe. We hope PVC pipe lasts 200 years, not 100 years.
As long as they told us it would.
Right, right. I mean, right now they say 100 years. I mean, who knows? Could be more, could be less. So.
And again, I want to make the same comment I made earlier in the main meeting for those people who are here now is the amount of pipe that we have in the ground reaches from here to Albertville to the outlet mall. That's how much pipe we have in the ground. And the stretch from here to Fergus Falls, the 50 miles, that's the bad stuff that needs to come out. So we're not talking about a couple of miles system. We're talking a very long line of water mains, and we need to address that issue.
Thank you. Any more questions on this slide right here? Basically our just history and couple-year forecast. And beyond that, we're looking at 5% for a few years to do the water main replacement. So, but I'm sure the commission's going to be looking at that closely. So here we have just how we compare again. And let's see, we compare against similar systems that have similar treatment processes. So it's not the same as the electric side. So Fargo, Fergus Falls, East Grand Forks, and Thief River Falls. And you can see we're competitive, but moving up. And the trend for water utilities, because of the infrastructure issue, is up in all communities. So 5% is probably modest increase when you look at others. We've had recent surveys that showed a lot of utilities are going up by 10% this next year. So that is all for the slides I have for
Anybody,
water.
any comments or questions? Members of the commission? Mike, were you going to ask a question?
I'd like to make some comments after the second hearing is over with regard to the transfer, if I could.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, are there any members of the public who would like to step forward and be heard on the issue of the water rate hearing? Anybody like to speak? Yes, come on down.
Can we speak about something a little bit different on water?
Well, right now this is the rate hearing.
Yeah, I guess prefer we did with it.
Come on down and please identify yourself.
Genevieve Givers, 205 6th Avenue South. This comes in the form of a thank you and recognition of some of your employees, public service employees, because it did impact our rates. We had a leaky toilet, and somebody from there called us up and said, something's going on with your place, fix it. and it saved us a bundle. So I just wanted to give you a kudo, send up to those people.
Thank you. Yeah, we do have some wonderful employees at Moorhead Public Service, both on the electric side and the water side, and there's a reason why we have the level of reliability that we do in both of those venues. Anybody else have any comments they'd like to make? Okay, that having been said, I would entertain a motion to close the hearing.
I move we close the water hearing.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The water rate hearing is closed. And again, before we adopt anything, we will accept written comments. Written comments will be received for 30 days from the date of this hearing, and no action will be taken on the rates until 30 days from the date of this rate hearing. For comments to be considered by the Commission, written comments should be postmarked no later than Monday, December 9th, 2013, and mailed to Moorhead Public Service Commission, P.O. Box 779, Moorhead, Minnesota, 56561-0779, or email to mps@mpsutility.com with attention Moorhead Public Service Commission in the subject line of the email. A formal discussion regarding our rates will be handled by the Commission's action in our meeting on December 17th, 2013. And again, if somebody wants to put comments in front of this Commission, please feel free to do so. The members of this Commission are also members of this community, and we do take very seriously the role that we play here, and we do want to hear your comments. That having been said, Mr. Hewlett, you asked for a few moments?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I agree with the comment that was made earlier that I think we all need to do a better job of explaining to the public how all of this fits together, especially with regard to the transfer. You know, there's this unit of government here in Moorhead, Minnesota called the City of Moorhead, and it has various departments. One of the departments of the City of Moorhead is the Moorhead Public Service Department, part of the City of Moorhead. Oftentimes the conversation turns to, we did this and the city did that, or the city wants this. Well, we're all the city. We have the same customers, the same people that we all serve. The city has about a $65 million budget, and roughly $22 million of that is called the general fund. And the general fund covers police, fire, streets, administration primarily. And that's about a $22 million budget. And the money coming into that budget comes from three places. It comes from local government aid, which comes from the state of Minnesota. About $8 million of it comes from taxes, the property taxes, which then the property taxes amount to about 12.3% of our entire city budget. And the other 8 million roughly comes from this transfer from the utility. And the city charter was, our constitution has that language in it which provides for the transfer from the gross revenues of the utility to help come into the general fund to pay for police, fire, and those other things that I mentioned. The charter has a limit on how much that can be. And when you go back and look all the way to 1944, it's been at the maximum of 20%. It's stated in a percentage of gross revenues taken from net revenues. And Nancy could help me out. I think for 2013, we're on the electric piece, we're about 17.3%, right in there somewhere. And, or the actual, I think about 18.05%. But at any rate, it can't exceed 20%. So the charter controls how much money can be transferred over to the general fund. So as we talk about all this, it's not like the city is arbitrarily grabbing money from the utility for whatever purposes. It's all by design, and it's all according to the city charter. And we are having some great discussions now between myself and another member of the city council and 2 members of the commission on how we can better communicate in the future on how we determine how much is going to be transferred. And you know, when we're both setting our budgets, that we talk well in advance on what our budgets look like and how we're going to work together to determine a transfer that makes a lot of sense. But if, you know, just as an example, if we were to cut the transfer in half, let's say to $4 million, we would have to find another $4 million from somewhere else for the general fund. And it would have to come from taxes. So we would have to raise property taxes by that amount to make up for the reduction in the transfer from the utilities. Does that make sense? Is that correct, Mr. Manager, that that's kind of how it works?
I would agree.
So maybe with one caveat that there has been a 30-year discussion between our 2 parts of the city on the definition of gross revenue and net revenue. I believe there is language in the charter that talks about net revenue, so it is not that the city has the right to transfer just 20%. There's a limitation on that, and I think we should take that into account.
And we're trying in our discussions to come to some agreement on what that language means, and we're having excellent discussions in that regard. So I just, you know, I want to make sure the people at home and the people here understand that this is all being done according to formulas of sorts, the city charter especially, and the city could not just arbitrarily reduce the transfer without finding the money somewhere else to operate police, fire, you know, all those things that we need here as residents of the city. So I appreciate the opportunity to kind of go through that.
You're more than welcome, Mike, and quite frankly, Councilperson Hewlett has been more than reasonable in handling and working with us in terms of these discussions, and these discussions are welcomed by the Moorhead Public Service Commission, and we look forward to more in-depth discussions. The transfer is a big item for this commission, as everybody sitting here is aware, and we are trying to manage that as part of our budget and to also benefit the city. And I'll go back to comments made by a former commissioner, Mr. Dave Curson. And if Dave's out there watching on television, well, he might not be, he's probably in Arizona. But Dave would say that we are them and they are us, and we are a part of this city. And we know that part of our charge as a commission is to provide revenue to the city. But like when you're talking to your children, sometimes you want to limit the amount of revenue that you give to the city. So yes, we have discussions and we have opposing views, but at the same time, we do so, we are friends. We are together in this whole endeavor. Did you have a comment you were going to make?
It looks like I've got a comment. The one thing I always like to remind people, and this is just a little bit of a clarification on the 17.3 and the 20, because we talk about 20 being the transfer, to the general fund. By the charter, there's a maximum of 20% that can go to the general fund, but there is an additional 5% that goes to the capital improvement fund, which is still a transfer to the city. So I always like to remind people that the total, if you take the 17.3 plus 5, because the other one is 5, you're at, what, 22.3? So I mean, we're actually above 20, closer to the 25, and the national average for utilities is around 5 or 6%. So we're at about 22%. Now, one of the reasons we can do that is because we have Western Area Power on the electric side, and our rates are still competitive. But we're getting a smaller and smaller portion of that. So that's where the management comes in. Over time, we have to wean ourselves off a little bit of the city has to wean themselves off a little bit from us. And
Well, if I can bring us back to a point of order,
Yeah,
however.
yeah, that's fine.
I would appreciate doing so. I welcome Councilperson Hewlett's comments. I welcome your comments. I welcome the comments from the people of this community. We are working on all of this, and we'll continue to work on all of this on a regular basis. That brings us back to a sump pump. Mr. Knutson, if you would like to, if you'd like to continue with your show and tell, we'd be welcome to do it.
I don't know if there's much more to show and tell.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
But we can certainly get back to the discussion. And one follow-up to the discussion on water main and how we determine those levels. Moorhead Public Service does have a water main asset management plan that was presented earlier this year. That plan is now actually on the website, so if the public would like to see, it's under the water operations on our website if they'd like to look at some of how we determine those levels for water main replacement. But getting back to the topic of sump pumps, one of the things that is important too in this process, I'll just go back to a little bit of the history of the water service rules and regulations. So they were created in 1973. We went through this amendment process in 2011, 2012. And now we're to the point where we need to make some determination on what we do with water-powered sump pumps. And to kind of guide staff in the determination that we need to make, we looked at basically all the regulatory bodies that we could think of and what was their input and advice on this particular topic. And it's kind of a new topic, although MPS has restricted their utilization. So customers haven't been able to use water-powered sump pumps in their homes since 1973. But for the bodies that govern water utilities, it's still kind of a new topic for them. And there's no strong recommendations for or against them. There's a few caveats in how they're installed and things like that, but overall, basically the determination is that if utilities want to have them, they can certainly do so. If they don't, they have the right to govern that. And that's the case for Moorhead Public Service. We've, again, not allowed them since 1973. The reason we haven't allowed them is due to that excessive water usage clause that we had in our previous rules and regs. We maintain that language in our current rules and regs. I think the discussion that we had with Mr. Anderson was that we may want to consider the possibility of being more specific in our rules and regs, either saying we can keep the language the way it is, but we may want to say that their usage is still restricted in the city of Moorhead.
Let me ask you this, Chris, and I'll turn to Mr. Anderson in a moment, but what would you like us to do?
My recommendation would be probably to keep the same language that we have, and that's based on their excessive water usage, so that water usage during a power outage is pretty substantial, creates a large capacity demand on our distribution system, and our distribution system wasn't really designed to handle that type of demand.
Okay.
And I assume we have the same issue on the wastewater side then. I mean, if the electricity out, the big pumps are probably down, and we don't want to put more water into the system.
That's correct. So the city would have to pump that water to their wastewater plant as well. So in theory, it could accelerate that water.
That, of course, is if the sump pump is connected to the wastewater.
That's assuming that assumption, yep.
Mr. Anderson, do you have a recommendation?
Well, we had a pretty free-ranging discussion at lunch here a couple of weeks ago, and it kind of came down to your very same question. You know, Chris,
And I wasn't even there.
What do you think we ought to do? And we talk about everything from getting really active with the city and you know, going after something with the strength of an ordinance or whatever. You know, restricting the sale of them in the community, but that's kind of a restraint of trade. You know, there are a lot of people that come over here to buy things that are used, you know, in other communities.
Yeah, and that wouldn't be the intention. You could certainly sell them.
Yeah, I mean, you know, that's one of those options in here that just kind of we throw away. But
Oh, I said we would not
Yeah.
restrict the sale. You can sell them, buy them, do whatever you want with them at
Yeah.
Moorhead.
So has the current language worked?
But well, I think the other point though was to educate. You know, was to really get with the retailers, get with the plumbers, get with the people that are actually in the middle here.
Yep.
And have them educated to the point where they understand that in the community of Moorhead, if they're being asked to install one of these, they're going to communicate with their customer to say the community has restricted these, so that we're working within the industry as well. So.
Are you prepared to make a recommendation in the form of a motion?
I really kind of wanted to get it in front of the rest of you a bit. And maybe we just hold for another meeting so that you can kind of digest what it is that Chris has presented here. I think staff has presented appropriate reasons for us to still be concerned about these pumps in our system, given the frequency of flooding, the frequency of the use of the sump pumps in our community, the volume of water that's going to be used. It just seems to make sense that we don't want them on the system.
Okay. Les, did I see you moving toward your microphone?
Yeah, what they're presenting is only an update report. It's not a policy change, so I move we accept the report.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same sign. That motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, Chris.
Yep, you're welcome.
We will not be going into closed session tonight. Upcoming meetings, the Moorhead Public Service Commission will probably be meeting on November 19th. Is that what I'm hearing? As opposed to the 26th?
Works for me.
It works for me, works for Les?
I always keep Tuesday open.
Okay.
Yep, I'm good.
Okay, sounds like we're the 19th. Could I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.